Hello, this is Matt Harris with Verado, and today we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart, e-commerce systems. Um, my company, Harris Webworks, which sponsors Verado, we've been in the e-commerce game for years, and I personally have been doing e-commerce as a profession since the late 1990s. So I have almost 30 years of experience in e-commerce, and I've seen a lot of things change and evolve over the years. So I'm just going to get into what the current platforms are. We won't go into the history of e-commerce because it's too complicated. We'll just talk about the current state of e-commerce, the different platforms, and where I kind of see the different platforms' strengths and weaknesses, and what businesses might want to think about when they're considering either getting onto an e-commerce platform for the first time or possibly replatforming to a new e-commerce platform. So the first screen we have up, this is a graph taken from Built With, and this would be the top 1 million sites, and this is kind of current data. So as of today, we're into May 2024. So as of May 2024, according to Built With, and according to the top 1 million sites, so that's not all websites, but the top 1 million, which is a pretty good kind of summary. Shopify is going to be your number one platform, WooCommerce number 2, Magento number 3, and then Shopify Plus, which they've segmented off of Shopify, is number 4, and then PrestaShop, and then Other, which would be everything else. This is another thing from Built With that just shows them in a ranking. And the ones with the red arrows are the ones we're going to focus on today. There's a few at the top of this list that we're not going to talk about. And the reason is they're kind of older platforms that are declining, or they're very small, kind of do-it-yourself platforms, or they're declining in market share. So they're really not relevant, I would say. Some people will argue with me, but for the sake of this, because there's literally hundreds of the platforms, we're going to focus on just a few of them. And there's a couple that are in the top 10, PrestaShop and OpenCart, Square, Wix. We're not going to talk about those platforms because they're all pretty much not what I would call, ready for any kind of medium-sized business. There's a lot of do-it-yourself businesses that have URLs up there with these platforms, and those are getting indexed, but these are not like players in the industry. Let's just put it that way, for the most part. So this is the Gartner report. It's another way of looking at this. Gartner does this Magic Quadrant. It's kind of famous in the industry. Anyone investigating a platform will, or any of the technologies will often do research and present these Magic Quadrants. Like, here we are on the Gartner Quadrant, and it could be an ERP system, e-commerce, or whatever. So again, kind of another top level view of what is relevant within, assessing these platforms. This is Gartner, big research company, and they try to stay unbiased. And on this one, these are the few that we're going to focus on. These 6, and then those are all the ones we're not going to focus on today. And some of them are just not relevant. They're not really visionary platforms, and they're not really challenger platforms, with the exception of these 2. And the reason we're not going to talk about them is that SAP is really only a platform that people are going to use, SAP Commerce, if they're already on SAP ERP system. So it's very specific to a business that's already has an engagement with SAP. That's not to say it isn't a good platform, but it's not something you would re-platform over to if you're not already on SAP. And it's going to be kind of mid-market to up-market, so it's definitely not a starter platform. So it's not really relevant for this conversation. And I would say it's not really one of the players moving forward. That's my opinion, in terms of how the market's going to shake out in the next 5 or 10 years. So SAP is a good platform if you're already on SAP ERP system, but I wouldn't be looking at it if you're not. And then VTEX is really interesting. I just don't know enough about it. It's coming up more and more, so I might do a podcast just about VTEX, but I don't feel comfortable talking about it today because I don't know enough about it, and I don't know other agencies that are using it. So I have a lot of friends in the e-commerce agency world, and a lot of them are focused on these platforms. So some of these platforms I have firsthand experience with, and some of them I know through reputation. So these are the ones that we're going to focus on today. It's going to be Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, and Adobe Commerce, which are basically the same platform. I'll explain that quickly. Commerce Tools, Shopware, Commerce Cloud, which is Salesforce Commerce Cloud, which is also Demandware. It's the same platform. Salesforce bought it. And then WooCommerce, which runs on WordPress, and then Custom, which is just basically, there's a million systems out there that are none of these. They're just somebody building something from scratch. And there's good reasons to do that and good reasons not to do that as well. So then I just took these, let's call it 8 platforms plus custom, and tried to grade them using a very kind of simple system in terms of entry level ease of use, development time and cost, and whether or not they're a good fit for a small business, medium business, enterprise business, or a business that wants to do B2B. Their take rate, which is the rate at which they are charging you per transaction or as a percentage of transaction fees. So if it's a 3% take rate, a $100 order, there'll be a 3% take from the platform. Customizable is essentially, is it very customizable, easy to customize? And then is it future-proof? And then is it considered a SaaS platform, a PaaS platform, or an open source? There's some kind of weird gray area between what is SaaS and what is PaaS, but SaaS stands for software as a service. PaaS stands for platform as a service. And is it software as a platform? It's like, people can kind of get into granular discussions, but I think the important point here is there's 3 that are open source, and that does give you, typically those open source ones are more customizable. So let's just go through them real quickly. Shopify is, I think, game changer platform, probably the best e-commerce in a box kind of platform. You want to get it up and running. You want to sell stuff quickly. Shopify is probably going to be your best bet. Anecdotally, my son came home on spring break and built a Shopify site on spring break in high school. So it's not super complicated. That's where it shines. Small business, time to develop, ease of use, entry level. Shopify's 5 stars across the board. Now, as you scale, Shopify becomes maybe less of a platform of consideration. Might even be one that you want to migrate off of as you grow. You get into B2B, you get into mid-market, you get into enterprise, it gets back to that take rate. You see their take rate, 1 star. That means they're always going to get a 3%, 2.5 to 3.5% of every single transaction. And that can hurt businesses as they grow. It's not very customizable because it's, again, shopping in a box. It's not open source. It's a SaaS platform. But I think because of its market penetration, so many businesses are on it. I would consider it, relative to the rest of these platforms, very future-proof. I don't think Shopify is going anywhere. It still is filling a need for entry-level e-commerce better than anybody else. So the next one's BigCommerce. BigCommerce, again, it does have an easier and faster development time than some of these other platforms. It might not be as good for small business as Shopify, but it might be a little bit better for mid-market businesses because you have more control over the take rate. It's more customizable, and it's better for B2B than Shopify. And usually in the mid-market to enterprise level, you're going to be selling in different ways, and you're going to want to be able to control how you sell. So BigCommerce gives you tools that allows you to sell in different ways and is not locking you into, you have to do it this way, it's a fixed system, and we're going to take that 3% take rate. So like with BigCommerce, you can use different processors, and you can also sell B2B where you're not taking a credit card, which allows the merchant or the business to control that take rate. So moving on to Magento. Refresher, Magento and Adobe Commerce are the same platform, the core platform. Adobe has the trademark rights to the name Magento, but there's a whole Magento open source community that doesn't have anything to do with Adobe. It's a little complicated. And then Adobe Commerce is the enterprise version. It has some built-in B2B functionality plus some other functionality. They're trying to package it with Adobe Experience Manager. And that tool, that combination of tools, that suite of tools is really good for enterprise. So that's a really good enterprise system. But within just the Adobe Commerce, there's Adobe Commerce Cloud and Adobe Commerce On-Prem. And then there's Magento Open Source, but at the core, they're all the same system. Kind of complicated, but this is the world we're in. We're a Adobe Commerce certified agency, Harris WebWorks, the company sponsoring the podcast. And we know a lot about this platform in this world. And so with that in mind, I still believe that Magento is a good platform for small business, because if you find a good partner that has a solution that's ready to go, it can actually be as cheap and as fast as Shopify to get up and running. But the caveat is you have to find a partner that can help you do that. And that's where it's not 5-star, because it's not like you can, do this on your own, or there's 100 Shopify agencies that can do it fast. It's a little harder to find a Magento shop that can do it on a fast time frame and a budget. That being said, and Adobe Commerce and Adobe Commerce Cloud is even going to be a little bit more prohibitive in terms of entry level, ease of use, and development time and costs. However, once you're on one of those platforms, it scales really well, and you have a lot more control over how you use the platform, how you customize the platform, how you sell on the platform. You can build out multiple web stores, multiple domains on the same instance. One can be B2B, the other can be B2C. You can have 5 different catalogs, 3 different domains. It's just very scalable and flexible. And so for a larger business or a mid-market business that has different rules and maybe legacy systems that it needs to tie into, I think Magento is a really good platform. And the fact that it's open source makes it durable. It's kind of like the 1-2 punch. Open source software is hard to kill off because it's not tied to profitability or a publicly traded parent company. So that's Magento. Adobe, of course, is publicly traded, but they're going after enterprise clients mostly. And they can service those enterprise clients really well. But they have this core tech that's supported by an open source community that are folding into their enterprise offerings. So it's kind of an interesting, dynamic there. And there's some complexity to it, but it's proven, I think, over the course of the years, and I think it will continue to prove to be super durable. I don't think it's going anywhere. Even though I was concerned as an agency owner that's deeply invested in Magento, I was very concerned about market share being taken away by BigCommerce and Shopify. I just don't see, personally, it going anywhere. So anyway, it's great for enterprise, great for B2B, super customizable. I do think it's future-proof. I would consider the open source version more future-proof than the Adobe Commerce version, because the open source community will keep it going no matter what. Then there's Commerce Tools. Commerce Tools is more of an enterprise. I think it's going to be a little bit more expensive and harder to get up and running, but it has that flexibility to scale. And it's got a lot of case studies where they're doing interesting enterprise level and B2B hybrid builds on it. It's apparently very customizable, and it has a really good reputation in that world. Shopware is a European company. They have much more traction in Europe, but they're starting to gain traction in the United States. I would say they're kind of in the middle in terms of ease of use. They are open source. I think they're kind of positioning themselves more in the B2B world than the B2C, which is where you're going to see a lot of growth. So you're seeing like a lot of these companies, with the exception of Shopify, really retool their offering towards B2B. And that's Shopware and Commerce Tools are also getting traction in that area. So whether or not they're future-proof, they're going to have 3 stars there. I think it's kind of time will tell. It's a very demanding and competitive marketplace, so I don't know. I think more options is better. But you've got to deal with, the Shopifys and the Adobe Commerces of the world. And it could be some of these platforms work well in Europe and they don't really gain traction over here, but they're still viable and they'll have a long shelf life. Okay, so Commerce Cloud. Commerce Cloud was Demandware. It's an old platform. It was bought by Salesforce and they package it up with Salesforce. So Salesforce is the life force of Commerce Cloud. Demandware would probably be declining. It is already declining. Without its relationship with Salesforce, I think it's probably irrelevant at this point. The thing keeping Commerce Cloud alive is Salesforce. And it's one of those things like SAP. There's no reason to use Commerce Cloud, I don't think, unless you're already on Salesforce. And if you want to package up Commerce Cloud with your Salesforce system, then that might be a really good solution for you. But if you're starting from scratch or replatforming and you're not already fully invested in Salesforce, I would say stay away. And I would also say, if you're not already fully invested in Salesforce, do your research. Salesforce is not for everybody. Salesforce is great for companies that have large sales teams and sales workflows that are very specific and have some complexity, and they need to manage large groups of salespeople. Salesforce is great for that. It's the best. And it's the leading, CRM, customer relationship management system in the world for a reason. A lot of it's because it was the first cloud-based one. But anyway, I would say less relevant and probably not so super future-proof. So I would stay away. WooCommerce, again, is built on WordPress. It's open source. I'm an advocate for open source. I think it is pretty easy to get going on it. It's pretty affordable to get going on it. There's lots of developers out there. You're going to have to do a little bit of research, but you can get a WooCommerce site up and running pretty quickly, pretty fast. It's a pretty good fit for small business. And again, it's got the take rate is kind of like however you want to configure it. It's very customizable because it's open source. And I think it's, I would give it a medium in terms of future-proof. Again, WordPress is the biggest content management system in the world. And WooCommerce is the eCommerce plugin for that content management system. And again, open source is durable. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but it's not for enterprise. It's not for mid-market. It's not for B2B. I'll give you an example of a profile of a business that I think it would be a good fit for later in this deck. Custom is like everything else. Again, don't do custom if you're small. Don't do custom if you're startup. Only do custom if it makes sense. You have an IT team. You already have a custom solution. Custom is kind of crazy, and you need to be a big company and know what you're doing before you start building a custom system. It'll be hard to control costs. It's going to be really hard to predict how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost. And again, it's like, is it future-proof? Who knows? Depends on how you built it. So, but there's a big chunk of the market is custom. Some of the oldest sites in the world were custom built. and you can still do it, but I wouldn't recommend it, or it depends on the specific case. So take rate. This is what I want to get into with the scaling these platforms. So I kind of nerded out on this spreadsheet, and just bear with me for a second. I want to talk through this. So take rate is essentially that percentage that a platform takes of each order. So usually it's around 3%. Credit card processing is around 2%. And there's all kinds of fluctuations and negotiations you can have. But your typical Shopify site, which is the biggest platform in the world, e-commerce, is going to take about 3%. It might be 2.5, it might be 3.5, but I think 3%, for the sake of discussion, is a good guesstimate on what they're going to take. So what does that mean in terms of the size of your business? How much money is that 3% going to be? And how much is it going to be as a percentage of your cost of running an e-commerce store front or an e-commerce platform? Well, typically, as you grow, your development costs will not grow as fast as your revenue. So, for instance, if you have a $200 million website, the cost to develop that website is not going to be considerably more than a $400 million website. The scale between 200 and 400 million and the amount of engineering that goes into it is not considerably more. That cost will go up depending on complexity, customizations, etc. So, for the sake of argument, let's take revenue and let's show it growing by 4 times, 4x growth. So each one of these rows becomes a different size of e-commerce business. So if you're growing 4x, you're going to just start with 100,000, you go into 400,000, 1.6 million, 6.4 million, 25 million, and so it goes up to $1 billion. So each time the business grows 4 times bigger, let's just say your dev costs only go up 2.5 times. So as you grow, your dev costs don't grow as fast, which is reasonable. Like I said, a $200 million website is not going to be that much more expensive than a $100 million website, or a $400 million website is not going to be that much more expensive to build than a $200 million. So the cost as a percentage of the revenue will go down, and so will the platform fees and hosting. So what I've shown here is as you grow at 4 times growth, let's just say each business, as an example of something that's 4 times bigger, the dev costs and platform fees will only go up 2.5%. However, the take rate stays the same. Through all of that growth, the take rate stays at 3%. So as your total costs go up, your costs as a percentage of revenue go down, and the take rate goes up. So the take rate becomes a much, much, much bigger piece of the expense of the platform. Not the dev costs, not the platform fees, not the hosting, it's the take rate. So this next slide is a graph. And now you can see how when you start as a starter company, that take rate is very small in comparison to the rest of the costs. And it becomes exponentially more expensive as you grow. So once you get into a $200 to $300, $400 million business, you're getting up into where that take rate becomes 60 to 70% of the costs of running the platform. So the problem is, in the B2B world, the wholesale world, the margins are very thin. They're not going to give 3% to a platform. There's no way. They have ways to move transactions through their systems without using credit cards. So they can use ACH, or they can provide credit to existing companies. They'll do wires to transact money, and just handwritten checks. So they're not going to give 3% to a platform that's just running an e-commerce store. And this is the problem with Shopify. The problem with Shopify is that their business model is essentially a cash register. They're a financial technology company with a shopping cart and a credit card processor built in to it, and they're going to take 3% of every single transaction, which is great if you want to get up and running fast. It's not great when you grow to enterprise level or even mid-market. So my argument is Shopify is great for certain businesses that are small, startups, up and running. But when you get into the complicated stuff, it doesn't make sense anymore. And I don't think they've really figured it out. I think Shopify is trying to go up market, but given the position of Adobe in that marketplace and the SAPs and the Salesforces of the world, I just don't think they're going to get there. I think they're going to stay kind of mid-market and down. And that's why Adobe has basically gone after enterprise. They see that they have strength there. And Shopify won't be able to take that part of the marketplace from them. That's my opinion. So anyway, that's the breakdown of the platforms, the top ones. And then I want to give you just an example of how each platform might make sense for a specific type of business. So the first business is a small up-and-coming apparel brand looking to quickly build an e-commerce website so they can focus most of their attention and funding on finding customers and growing their brand. So they just need a landing spot that looks nice, where they can sell their products, nice photography, good product descriptions. They can get it up quick and easy, and they can put most of their attention on driving traffic to that site and finding new customers. 100% Shopify. That is exactly Shopify's wheelhouse. And I would say, just if that's what you're doing, if you're selling apparel and you're just trying to start your own e-commerce company, and it's going to be a direct-to-consumer company where you've got a product and you're trying to find your customers, just go with Shopify. 100%. Now, what if you're a local brewery and you want to have events and you want to maintain your own website and you want to have a photo gallery and you want to have a blog and you want to kind of create a lot of different content. And then you also want to sell some swag on the side. That's WordPress plus WooCommerce. That would be my recommendation. WordPress, you get the best-in-class content management system in the world, in my opinion. Still a massive part of the marketplace. Tons of WordPress developers, thousands of them out there. It's easy to find somebody to help you do this. And Woo's just an extension you plug into it. So, you have the best-in-class content management system with a little swag store on the side. WordPress plus WooCommerce is a perfect fit for that type of business. The next business is a regional manufacturer with a small product line that is looking to sell both to consumers, but also through a B2B portal. So they have, this is simply 50% or 80% of your customers know what they want. They just want to go to the site, log in, get their wholesale rates, check out. Ease of use, fast. That's 80% of it. 20% is you've created a product line that you want to sell direct to consumer, and maybe you're going to find more of those B2B buyers in that process. So you need to be able to sell hybrid, what they say, both B2B and B2C. I would look at BigCommerce and Magento. For that type of company, those two platforms, I would vet both of those. And I basically wouldn't, if you're in the United States, I really wouldn't, look anywhere else. You might want to look at Shopware. You might want to look at Commerce Tools. I think Commerce Tools is going to be, a little cumbersome. I would just stick with BigCommerce and Magento, personally. The next is your 40 million gross market value business, GMV business. You're an older business that's both manufacturing and distributing. You have a few different product catalogs. So you sell some of your products are electrical, some are plumbing, some are HVAC. You have an older ERP system, and you have some complex business processes. You have very complex price books. You have tiered pricing, you have group pricing, you have special pricing, you have trade discounts. A lot of older businesses have these. The system's going to require a lot of customization. It's going to require order requests. Some are going to be credit card transactions, some won't. Some will be purchase orders. I would go with Magento, straight up. That kind of complexity, and you need to have that kind of control, and you're going to want to scale, I would go with Magento. If you're a $40 million business. If you're a $400 million business, I would look at Magento, Adobe Commerce, and Commerce Tools. Again, what Adobe offers a large business is the insurance policy of having your stuff hosted by another corporation. So that Commerce Cloud solution is really good for enterprise level businesses because it gives you the insurance policy of knowing that no matter what, another corporation is going to take responsibility for your stuff staying up. And it allows you the flexibility to change partners or to work with multiple partners. So instead of having the partner host your stuff, you have the corporation host your stuff. And yes, it's going to be more expensive. And yes, it's going to slow down some of your development time. But it sometimes is worth it. And then Commerce Tools is a really good fit for some enterprise businesses, and they have a lot of case studies around solutions they've built. So I would look at Commerce Tools as well. Now, if you're a B2B business with a high price point products and services that require a high level of interaction with your sales teams. So let's say your sales teams are deeply involved in closing deals, but you still need an e-commerce platform. I would look at, and there's a lot of businesses out there like that. I would look at Magento, Shopware, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. That's where the Salesforce CRM could really help you, or building a custom system. So that's basically how I see the different platforms working in the different types of businesses. Again, startup businesses, Shopify, small businesses that want to blog. You're looking at WordPress and WooCommerce. Any B2B solution that's mid-market, BigCommerce and Magento. If you have a lot of complexity and you're an older business, sometimes Magento is a really good fit because you can customize it very easily. It's open source. If you're going to go into scale to enterprise, you're going to look at Magento, Adobe Commerce, and Commerce Tools. And if you have, sales teams heavily involved, Shopware has a really cool solution. I would look at that. They have a tool that plays right into what the sales teams are asking for in terms of what an e-commerce platform can do in the sales engagement process. And I think Salesforce also has a good set of tools for that kind of business. And that's it. I'm going to do some more podcasts on specifically different e-commerce platforms, but that was, I thought, pretty good overview of where we are today in May of 2024. And again, things are going to change really fast. So, I could have a different opinion about these platforms next year, but that's where we are today.